Good afternoon and welcome to IBA News this Sunday, the 3rd of July. I'm Elon Aslan-Levy, joining you live from Jerusalem. Thousands today attended the funeral procession of Rabbi Michael Mark, who was killed in a drive-by shooting attack along Road 60 outside of Hebron on Friday afternoon. Rabbi Mark, a father of 10, was the director of Otniel's Orthodox Yeshiva. He was laid to rest at the Har HaMenuchot cemetery in Jerusalem. President Reuven Rivlin was a distant relative of the victim. In his eulogy, the president said the entire nation was grieving over the loss. Addressing the crowd at Otniel from memorial service prior to the burial, Rivlin said that terrorism has accompanied Israel from its earliest days, but does not weaken the Jewish people's resolve and will never destabilize its hold on the country. Jewish blood is not worthless, added the president, vowing that Israel would win the fight against terrorism and that its security forces would cut down the murderers of the slain rabbi. Earlier today, the children of the late Rabbi Mark released a video calling on the public to pay their respects and join the procession. One daughter described Rabbi Mark as a father not just to them, but to so many others as well. Another invited the public so that everybody could hear something good about her father and take that good and be better people. The IDF has arrested several suspects on the West Bank as part of the hunt for those responsible for carrying out the fatal drive-by shooting, the second deadly attack in as many days. Due to the upsurge in violence, the IDF beefed up its presence across the West Bank, deploying 2 battalions to help secure settlements and surrounding areas. Last night, dozens of settlers staged protests at different locations in Judea and Samaria, urging the government to act harshly in response to the brutal attacks. IBA's Margot Dudkevich has this review.
The closure imposed on Hebron and surrounding villages by the army remained intact today, as security forces hunted down the terrorists involved in Friday's drive-by shooting, in which 48-year-old Rabbi Michael Mickey Mark was killed, his wife Chava, age 40, seriously injured, and 2 of their children, Tehila, age 13, who was moderately injured, and 15-year-old Padaya, who was lightly injured and released from hospital last night. The family were driving on Road 60 near Otniel when Palestinian terrorists overtook their car and opened fire at close range before fleeing. Rabbi Mark, who was fatally injured, lost control of the car, which overturned on the roadside. The father of 10 children, Rabbi Mark was the director of the Esder Yeshiva in Otniel. Security officials said more than 20 bullets hit the vehicle. Minutes after the attack, Palestinian motorists stopped to assist the family. Following the shooting, the army boosted its presence in Judea and Samaria, concentrating on the Hebron area. Security forces confiscated surveillance cameras of Palestinian businesses, hoping the footage would assist in identifying the assailants of Friday's shooting attack. Over the weekend, soldiers conducted house-to-house searches in a number of villages, arresting suspects including family members of the 17-year-old terrorist from Bani Naim, who fatally stabbed 13-year-old Hallel Yafeh Ariel as she slept in her bed Thursday morning in her Kiryat Arba home. The spokesman for the U.S. Secretary of State, John Kerry, condemned the attack.
You may have seen, or at least I hope you saw, my statement this morning about the outrageous terrorist attack in the West Bank, where a 13-year-old girl, Hallel Ariel, was stabbed to death in her home. We have now confirmed that she is a U.S. citizen. This brutal act of terrorism is simply unconscionable. We offer our heartfelt condolences, of course, to her family and to her friends.
Hours before the shooting attack near Otniel, security forces shot a Palestinian woman near the Machpelah cave in Hebron who attempted to stab troops. Searching the area, soldiers found a second knife. Early Thursday evening, an armed civilian shot dead a Palestinian terrorist who stabbed 2 Israelis, seriously injuring one, in an outdoor market in Netanya. Since the outbreak of violence in September last year, 40 Israelis have been killed and more than 430 injured in terror attacks that show no signs of abating. Margot Dudkevich, IBA News.
Speaking at the start of today's weekly cabinet meeting, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stressed that Israel is implementing measures against terrorism never used before in the past. Today's meeting came on the heels of last night's emergency security cabinet meeting, which dealt with the present wave of terror attacks. Ministers agreed to a list of measures aimed at deterring terrorists and preventing attacks. Amongst the steps made public, Israel has imposed a closure over 700,000 Palestinians in the Hebron area. The work permits of residents of Bani Na'im, the village of the terrorist who murdered 13-year-old Hallel Yafa Ariel, was revoked. Israel will also deduct from the monthly tax revenues transferred to the Palestinian Authority sums equivalent to the stipends paid by Ramallah to terrorists and their families. In addition, the Security Cabinet agreed not to return the bodies of terrorists to their relatives. They will be buried instead in a special cemetery. The government also agreed to build 42 new housing units in Kiryat Arba, the site of last Thursday's attack. The Security Cabinet is set to convene once again later this evening. According to Education Minister Naftali Bennett, the situation requires Israel to take a new tack. Speaking to Israel Radio this morning, Bennett demanded more punitive action against the Palestinians. It is inconceivable, he said, that terrorist families be permitted to celebrate and receive funds from the Palestinian Authority. The minister also proposed restricting Palestinian internet access to combat incitement on social media and halting Palestinian traffic on Route 60. Meanwhile, Public Security Minister Gilad Erdan has come out strongly against Facebook, which he accuses of having blood on its hands for failing to censor Palestinian incitement against Israel and Israelis on social media. Dubbing the social media network a monster, Erdan accused Facebook of sabotaging Israeli police work, saying it refused to cooperate with authorities on violent posts uploaded by Palestinians. Israel is concerned that Palestinians have used social media to promote terrorism and is drafting legislation to force agencies to remove such content. Facebook replied that it conducts regular dialogue with the authorities and urged users to report content they believe violates guidelines which prohibits encouragement of violence, direct threats or verbal abuse, so that Facebook can indeed take proper action. Dr. Amira Halperin is an associate researcher at the Hebrew University's Truman Institute, focusing specifically on the use of social media by Palestinians. She joins me now from our Tel Aviv studio. Dr. Halperin, welcome.
Thank you.
What does Minister Erdan mean when he talks about incitement on social media?
When we talk about incitement in social media, is basically the major change that we can see in recent years in the Palestinian arena. Since 1948, there is one guideline that guides many of the Palestinians, having said that we have to be cautious and remember that other Palestinians hold different opinions. But most of the Palestinians believe since 1948 that the problem of the Palestinians is to be blamed by the Israelis' occupation, so-called, and the IDF.
So is he talking about posts that deliberately incite to violence, have anti-Israel content? What specifically is this incitement?
This incitement, we can divide it into two. One thing is we can see the whole dialogue in Facebook, in Twitter, in other social media, which talks about the Palestinians' loss of their homes in 1948. They speak about the historical perspective, the historical issues, talking about the Nakba, about the loss of homes. And this is one thing that leads to incitement, because once they speak about the blame, and they blame the Israeli government in losing their house, this is already enough for terrorists to take this further. The second thing is specifically referring to terrorist attacks that have been occurred or encouraging terrorists to take terrorist attacks.
What efforts is the Israeli government taking to crack down on this phenomenon?
Can you repeat, please?
What steps is the Israeli government taking to crack down on this online incitement? We mentioned perhaps possible legislation to force compliance from social media networks.
Israel can. I don't believe that Israel can. I mean, that I should speak about the policy at the moment, really in details. But Israel is only one side of the game. Israel has to work on it. And there is also, of course, the international community in terms of the Facebook and other international networks. And another thing that's important to say is that the Palestinian incitement, where they operate in the online and offline arena. Once an online incitement would be stopped, there is still a major problem in Gaza that there is lack of control there in the offline arena. So even if we see terrorists that going out and taking terror attacks and incite for terrorism, there is no enough power and people that will deal with this inside the territories. So Israel...
Dr. Halperin, the end of last week saw a return to terrorism that we hoped was largely behind us. Should we expect these brutal incidents to be a one-off, or should we brace for a more serious uptick in violence?
I believe that the violence will continue as far as we can see it now. And we see that the situation is very serious when we talk about the incitement. It's a very serious situation because the people in Gaza and the young people, we see that they're ready to go out as alone, and the young people, as we saw in the recent case, 17-year-old boy, to go out and to carry out those attacks. And we have also to remember that it's very difficult to sort out this problem simply because of the reason that since 1948, this is the main perception among the Palestinians that Israel is to be blamed in this situation. And therefore, until a more comprehensive solution will be found, the negotiation will proceed, the problem of terrorism will not be tackled.
Well, in light of that, we speak frequently of lone wolf terrorism. How far are these attacks genuinely spontaneous, and how far are organized terrorist groups really involved somewhere in the background?
Most of them, as we see now, were not linked to a group, but of course there are things behind the scenes, and even young terrorists and young Palestinians, they have their own perceptions, but it's linked to an ideology of a movement. It is linked to ideology of people that they see every day, people that they speak with every day in the online and offline arenas. And another important point to remember is that it's not only a local phenomenon. I mean, we're not talking about only a link in Gaza and the West Bank, but in the international Palestinian community outside the Palestinian territories as well. We can see their incitement to terrorism as well. We can see there are people that act alone, as you said, but there are also people that cooperate with Hamas in other countries, in European and the US, for example, countries.
Dr. Halperin, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Tensions have flared up again along the southern border with Gaza. A children's daycare centre in Sderot suffered a direct hit late Friday night when rockets were fired from the Hamas-run enclave. The red alert sounded in the south close to 11 p.m., sending residents to shelters. The direct hit at the kindergarten caused extensive damage, shattering the windows of nearby homes. Thankfully, the kindergarten was empty at that late hour. 5 local residents were treated for shock. Another rocket fell in an open area in the Sha'ar HaNegev region. No injuries or damage were reported. Hours later, the Air Force targeted 4 Hamas terror sites in central and southern Gaza. Knesset Speaker Yuli Edelstein instructed Knesset security to increase protection for Knesset member Yehuda Glick of the Likud party after he received death threats and alerted the head of the Knesset security. These threats included a Palestinian animated video clip on YouTube titled "Yehuda Glick, you're next in line, you have no place in Palestine." The clip shows terrorists sneaking under the security fence towards the settlement of Otniel, where Glick resides, and shooting him. The footage is accompanied by a Hebrew song saying the Al-Aqsa Mosque is forbidden to Jews. In 2014, Glick was seriously wounded in an assassination attempt in Jerusalem. Elie Wiesel, considered the world's best-known Holocaust survivor, passed away yesterday at the age of 87. Born in 1928 in Romania, Wiesel and his family were deported by the Nazis to Auschwitz-Birkenau in 1944. Wiesel was sent to a forced labor camp. His mother and sister were murdered in the gas chambers, his father beaten to death by an SS guard. After the Holocaust, Wiesel moved to France, studied at the Sorbonne, and began a career in journalism, covering the 1961 Eichmann trial for The Forward. Wiesel authored over 40 books, most prominently his Holocaust memoir Night, which has, symbolically, sold over 6 million copies. After beginning a new life in America, Wiesel was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1986 for his activism against violence, racism and repression. Wiesel twice declined invitations from Prime Ministers Olmert and Netanyahu to serve as President of Israel. He was mourned across the world as a powerful voice for human rights and spokesman for Holocaust survivors. President Rivlin called Wiesel one of the heroes of the Jewish nation, who embodied the determination of the human spirit, the ability to overcome the most terrible evil, and live against all odds. The families of Shaul Oron and Hadar Goldin, the two IDF soldiers killed in Operation Protective Edge, whose remains are held by Hamas in Gaza, blocked trucks carrying goods to Gaza at the Kerem Shalom crossing today. The two families were joined by relatives of Avera Mengistu, a mentally ill Israeli who crossed into Gaza in 2014, where he is being held against his will along with an Israeli Arab. Today's action by the families is part of their ongoing protest over the agreement Israel signed with Turkey last week and the government's failure to condition the deal on the return of the 4 Israelis. The families said it is inconceivable that Israel permits hundreds of trucks carrying humanitarian aid into Gaza daily, while nothing is done to return their sons home. Sticking with Gaza, a Turkish ship carrying humanitarian aid for the Gaza Strip is expected to dock at Ashdod port today. Once the goods undergo inspection, they will be transferred through the Kerem Shalom crossing to Gaza. According to reports, the ship, called Lady Layla, is loaded with some 10,000 tons of toys, food, clothing, nappies and medication. Officials said the goods will hopefully reach the Gaza Strip in time for the Eid al-Fitr celebrations on Tuesday night. In the recently signed agreement between Jerusalem and Ankara, Israel refused to lift the naval blockade on Gaza, but agreed that aid dispatched by Turkey could transit through the port of Ashdod, where it would undergo inspection. In other news, the government responded quickly to the Middle East Quartet's long-awaited report on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Jerusalem accused the Quartet of perpetuating the myth that settlement construction is an obstacle to a two-state solution, charging it with ignoring the real core of the conflict, which it said was the persistent refusal by the Palestinians to recognize Israel as the nation-state of the Jewish people in any boundaries. 4 months ago, the Quartet, comprising Russia, the US, the EU and the UN, was tasked with evaluating the situation and suggesting a solution for peace. The report was released last week on the same day that 13-year-old girl Hallel Yafa Ariel was murdered in Kiryat Arba. The report highlighted terrorism and incitement to violence, settlement construction and the situation in Gaza as the main trends undermining hope for peace.
The main objective of this report is not about assigning blame, but rather providing a way forward to support the goal we all share of achieving a negotiated two-state solution. The Quartet has outlined a reasonable set of steps that, if implemented sincerely and resolutely, with support from the international community, could set Israelis and Palestinians firmly along a navigable course towards establishing a comprehensive peace with historic implications for the entire region.
Well, after that, to pick us up from out of the gloom, here are 5 good news stories that could lift your spirits at the start of this week. Researchers at Israel's Technion Institute have developed a new treatment for stomach cancer. The novel treatment can be administered orally rather than intravenously, so cancer patients should be able to take the drug independently at home. Staying with the Technion, where 3 computer science students have developed a mobile app that is able to detect whether a watermelon is ripe, sweet and juicy. Tests carried out on the app have so far proven to be 100% accurate, figuring out the quality of the watermelon in seconds. An Israeli NGO based in Nazareth called Sofen aims to integrate the Israeli Arab sector into the high-tech world and into Israeli society at large. The organization has branches in the Galilee and Triangle region and has also begun projects in the Kafr Qasim area. Just 6 months after being launched in the Israeli market, Netflix has begun adding Hebrew subtitles to some of its programs. So far, the company has provided Hebrew translations for 36 films. Israeli accessibility NGO wins a UN prize. Access Israel, which helps the disabled, was granted status as a special advisor to the UN's Economic and Social Committee for its special projects for the physically handicapped. In finance, more good news. Shares are up on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, and with no currency trading on Sundays, there's no change in the shekel today. In weather, tomorrow should be partly cloudy with a slight fall in temperatures. And that's all for today. We'll be back tomorrow with the latest news. I'm Elon Aslan Levy, wishing you a good evening and an even better week, live from Jerusalem.